You know what car you want and which neighborhood you want to live in, what you want to study, what you want to eat, and how you want your hair cut. And then when someone asks what you want in bed, you have no idea. And that gap doesn't happen by accident. Today we're getting into why sexual self-knowledge is so hard to access for so many women, where that comes from. And I'm going to offer you a question that actually opens that up instead, when the obvious question, what are you into in bed, doesn't yield a helpful answer for you. Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. My name's Cindy Darnell. I'm a sex and relationship therapist working with all kinds of people in all kinds of relationship configurations all over the world. And this channel is where we have the hard conversations that many of us have in our heads, but not out loud. Here we talk about relationships, desire, intimacy, connection, friendships, emotions, grief, and what gets in the way. So if that's what you're here for, you're in the right place, and we're going to get into it now. So when we ask a lot of men how they're feeling, I mean how they're really feeling, not just how their day went, many of them will quickly run out of words super fast. Happy, sad, angry, hungry, horny, maybe anxious if they've done a little bit of work on themselves. But past that, the vocabulary for a textured emotional landscape often dries up for a lot of men. Meanwhile, many women can reach for 6 or 7 gradations of the same feeling without pausing. Wistful, unsettled, quietly hopeful, a low-grade grief that doesn't have a name yet. As women, we're not inherently more emotionally sophisticated. That's not true. But we have had more practice at being asked to pay attention to our inner world and more social permission to develop language for this, while men broadly haven't had that. And so without practice and opportunity, the capacity for this skill remains underdeveloped, regardless of how much potential they have. And so when we can recognize this in men, it's important that we hold this thought, because the same mechanism can function in the opposite direction when it comes to women and sexual desire. Because for most of us, we were taught a very narrow script about how desire works. The education about desire specifically is rarely explicitly stated, and instead we absorb it over years. And largely the messages that we absorb is that desire is something that happens to us. Most of us are told that we get wanted, we get chosen, we get pursued. We are passive in this relationship with desire. So the experience of desire as something that originates within us, that we develop a relationship with and move toward and ask for a lot of us, that curriculum is absent. And so in a sexual context especially, it can feel really strange to try to locate it within us, or, let alone to name it out loud. And so what makes it particularly striking is actually how narrow that gap is, because you might know, for example, what you want from a restaurant, from a career, and from a friendship, and you can assess your own preferences across most of the other areas of your life pretty quickly and pretty confidently, that you have tastes and standards and a clear internal sense of what works for you and what doesn't. But when it comes to what you want sexually, that question lands completely differently for a lot of women. And it lands there because the opportunity to be curious about our own desire in that specific domain often gets thwarted in much the same way that men's emotional vocabulary gets thwarted unless they've put in significant effort and practice to develop it. So socially, we just don't encourage this kind of inquiry in our patriarchal society, and this lands in the bedroom and impacts all of us. So the woman who goes blank when asked what she wants in bed is very often the same woman who is entirely clear about what she wants from the rest of her life. And so being blank in this one specific area gives us the clue to what's missing. It's not that she's indecisive and she doesn't know herself. It's that she hasn't had the opportunity to really practice and lean into discovering what motivates her sexually and what that might mean for her going forward. So before we go any further, just pause for a moment and actually feel into this rather than just thinking about it. I want to invite you to bring to mind an area of your life where you know exactly what you want. Think of something really specific, perhaps a restaurant where you always order the same thing, or the kind of home environment that you need to feel settled, or a type of work that makes you feel really yourself. And then notice what that knowing feels like in your body. Pay attention to where you feel it. Is it in your chest? Is it in your gut? Is it somewhere around your shoulders? Just notice how it feels and where it is without trying to change it. Don't overthink it. Just go with what comes first. And now bring to mind a sexual situation, real or imagined, where someone asked you what you wanted, or where you wished you could say what you wanted, but you couldn't quite reach it. Where does that land in your body? Is there a tightening? Is there a blankness, a numbness, a kind of withdrawal or retreat? And just let both of those somatic sensations be there without trying to fix or resolve anything. Because the contrast between these two really tells us a lot of information about what we can explore here. So the dynamic between knowing what we want or not knowing what we want, unfortunately, or unsurprisingly, doesn't show up evenly, and there's a lot of information in this. Because, for example, women who have sex with women, or women who have sex with other genders, tend to report this blankness less often. And this is also true for women who are in casual arrangements or who are practicing non-monogamy. They also tend to report it less. And it tends to show up more for women having sex with men in more conventional or traditional relationship structures. And from that, I can glean, from almost 30 years of doing this work, that this variable really tends to point most to the question of opportunity. Women who are having sex with people who take a strong and robust interest in their sexuality, or women who are practicing being in situations where they get to present versions of themselves that are fresh and new more often, get to have more practice at accessing these parts of themselves than women who are in more conventional relationship structures where sex has become a bit more rote, a bit more robotic, a bit more predictable. Now, to be clear, I don't mean that in order to have a fabulous sex life, you have to be practicing non-monogamy or having casual sex. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But I am saying that if you are in a relational context where there's not a whole lot of opportunity for growth and change and expansion, this could be contributing to some of the stuckness and the blankness that you feel around the idea of, what do I even want from sex? Because the opportunity to practice turning toward your own desire with a partner who's genuinely curious about facilitating your experience and interested in what's happening for you internally, rather than primarily focused on what's happening for them while they are in your presence. And so where that opportunity exists consistently, something opens up. And where it doesn't, the empty space persists and often gets misread as a lack of interest or a lack of desire, rather than what it actually is, which is an absence of the right conditions for sexual pleasure to emerge. And this raises a question that is worth us exploring, which is, what would it mean to create those conditions for eroticism to emerge deliberately? So let's just pivot for a moment to the wrong question. Because when someone asks you what you would like in bed and you freeze, the question itself is often part of what's not working for you. Because it assumes that you already have a developed catalog, that you have had enough of the right experiences and enough space and enough permission and enough curiosity directed your way to know what you want in that specific domain. So for women whose desire is more responsive, meaning that it arises in context rather than appearing spontaneously, being asked to produce a list on demand is genuinely just not how that kind of access works, because responsive desire needs conditions. It needs atmosphere and connection and the right relational temperature. And so a question that skips all of that and goes straight to the menu is asking you to order in a language that you simply have never been taught. So the question worth asking yourself instead, and this is really important, is how do you want sex to make you feel? As women, we tend to be more fluent in emotional experiences rather than the physical preferences of sexual contexts. And for a lot of us, desire is an internal, emotional, somatic event before it ever becomes an erotic one. So many of us feel our way into it before we embody our way through it. And this is in part why I think erotic literature reaches many women in a way that pornography, traditional pornography alone, often doesn't. Because the literature is saturated with longing, an atmosphere, and anticipation, and an emotional texture, the inside of the desire rather than just the surface expression of the action. And so if what you're trying to access is a feeling or a relational quality, something that happens in your chest, in your heart, in your viscera before it happens anywhere else, then content that skips straight to high activity bypasses the key that fits the lock you're looking for. And that's information about how your desire is organized. And it's really critical that we take this seriously rather than treating it as a deficiency. So let's actually try that question now rather than just keeping it mentally filed away. Find a comfortable position and take one slow breath. Not a performance of relaxing, but I want to invite you to really feel your feet on the floor, feel your body in the seat. And when you're ready, let that question land. How do you want sex to make you feel? And don't reach for an answer straight away. Just notice what happens in the first few seconds. Does something stir? Does it go quiet? Does a word float up? Or does this question feel like it's asking you something in a foreign language? Does your mind jump immediately to what you think you should say? Or to what a past experience felt like? Or is there something else entirely? Allow yourself to sit with that question. How do you want sex to make you feel? And be curious. So whatever happens right now, that is your starting point. And you don't need a full answer. You just need to feel where you are right now with that question. And remember, if you want to go any deeper with any of this, be sure to head to my website, check out my online courses and my book, all of which is linked in the description below. So let's look now at what partnered sex can offer us that solo sex generally can't. While solo sex is great because it tends to be more physiologically reliable, it's easier for us to learn at a basic level what we like. The body is familiar, the approach that we use might be familiar, and for a lot of us, the outcome can be pretty predictable, and often for a lot of us, it's a far more reliable path to orgasm than, say, partnered sex can be. But partnered sex introduces so many other variables which we can use to increase and explore our eroticism. Variables such as emotional, relational, psychological, social can often be so overwhelming, making the physical harder to access for some of us in the moment, especially if our minds are on any of those other dynamics and not on our own visceral experience. But partnered sex can also offer a quality for some of us that hits other parts of us. It can put us into contact with versions of ourselves that we can't reach alone. Another person's desire for us, their attention, their curiosity about our experience, or the way they respond to us. These experiences activate something with no solo sex equivalent, because the emotional and psychological dimensions that can feel like obstacles in physical sex are also, for many of us, the actual fuel. The complexity for some of us is the point of partnered sex. So if the sex you've been having has moved efficiently through acts without much interest in what's happening inside you during the sex, then of course you haven't been able to say what you want. You've been present for the activity, but not truly met in the experience by you or by your partners. And so it's harder for you to develop a vocabulary for something you haven't yet had real access to. So the question to start with, once again, how do you want sex to make you feel when you imagine sex that actually works for you? Not just what you think you should want, but what you find yourself drawn to when something really catches you off guard in a book or a scene in a film that stays with you longer than you expected, or when you remember a time when things felt more alive than the sex you've been having lately. What are you feeling in that? What is the emotional quality, the relational texture, the thing that sits underneath the thing? Now, for some women, that word is power. Being fully in it, or being fully released by it, or releasing it entirely. And these can be two very different experiences that hold their own value in the erotic realm. For others, it's about longing, this feeling of a sustained wanting that doesn't immediately get resolved, but there's a tension in there, and that tension can be pleasurable in itself rather than something you need to move through and rush through quickly. For some others, it's attentiveness, being seen closely, having what you need anticipated before you've had to articulate it. That specific relief of being truly noticed by someone else. And for others, it's like surrender, which carries its own quality of release, not in a passive way, but being able to fully give yourself over to somebody else. So once you have a feeling, even a rough direction, just an approximate thing, you can then start asking yourself what kinds of contexts or dynamics or themes might open that up for you. So remember, we are not building a script for you or your partner to perform to. You're developing enough of a sense of your own internal orientation that when the right conversation happens, what do you feel like in bed? You actually have something real to bring to it. So the clues are in there, in what you're drawn to, in what stays with you, in what your imagination keeps returning to. And that direction really is your North Star here. So now, take a moment with what just came up for you, if anything did. If a word surfaced, power, longing, attentiveness, surrender, or perhaps something else entirely that belongs only to you. And then place one hand on your chest and just let that word be there. You don't need to do anything with it just yet. You don't need to share it with anybody, and you certainly don't need to make a plan. Just let your body register that this is real information about you, and it's not a fantasy or something that you have to do anything with or even talk yourself out of. Just let it exist and be there. And if, in this practice, nothing surfaced for you, that is also information too. Don't panic. It may simply just mean that the conditions for this kind of noticing haven't existed for you very much, which is exactly what this video is about. And instead, I offer you the practice of staying with the curiosity and allowing yourself to slowly, over the next couple of days and weeks, to just pay attention to what does emerge from you as you ponder that question. What do I want sex to make me feel? And allow the answer to emerge much more slowly over time, without forcing an answer. And whatever you find is valid and useful information for you to dig into and work with. And so for the last part of this video, I want to speak to the partners of people who struggle to answer the question, what do you enjoy in bed? Because if you're someone who's been having sex with women and the I don't know has been frustrating for you, then it's worth understanding what's going on for them rather than feeling like it's some kind of deficiency. So asking someone to name what they want before they've had the conditions to discover it is a question that sounds reasonable, but it doesn't function as a reasonable question. And that's because the conditions for discovery aren't just about permission and consent. They are about the quality of the attention that is being offered to them. So genuine curiosity about what's happening for your partner inside their experience of themselves, and not just tracking what's happening between you or how frequently you're having sex, but actually being interested in her inner world, her interior state, and staying slow enough with her so that there's room for something to surface. This changes what becomes possible in your sexual relationship together. Because a partner who is willing to facilitate rather than execute or dominate, who treats her responses as information rather than key performance indicators, creates the kind of relational environment where desire can actually really develop rather than just get pushed further underground. And so this is a different kind of sexual engagement that I want to invite you to learn about, because it asks more of you in some ways, and it opens up considerably more in your partner and in your relationship. And for a lot of couples, this is where the sex will stop being routine and you can actually pivot into something far more interesting than you've had before. I really hope this video has landed for all of you. Let me know in the comments below what you make of this, how this feels for you. And like I said earlier, if you're interested in going further with this work, please come over to my website, cindydarnell.com. Check out my online courses and my book, which is specifically about cultivating desire where it's never lived before. Thanks for supporting my channel. Please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments what you'd like to see more of in my work on this channel. I love making these videos for you, and your feedback really does help. And also consider sharing this with people who you think might benefit from it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.